The Energy Transition Podcast takes you directly to the cutting edge of the global energy sector's shift, with a specific focus on the critical role played by oil and gas, as well as the pathways developing around a lower carbon future. Your hosts, Leslie Beyer, Energy Workforce and Technology Council CEO, and Dan Pickering, founder of Pickering Energy Partners, are joined by Josh Lowry, president of Upright Digital. Each episode engages industry thought leaders in an exploration of market-moving trends and topics, including new technologies, ESG, capital markets, inclusion and diversity, workforce innovation, regulatory influences, and the voice of the people. Join us as the Energy Transition Podcast looks at the state of the traditional energy and oil field service sectors, emerging technologies, and the path ahead in a world of lower carbon energy development.
Welcome to the Energy and Transition Podcast. My name is Josh Lowry. I am coming to you a little bit different today from the Upright Digital Studios in Houston, Texas, but I am virtual today with the co-host extraordinaire, Mr. Dan Pickering. How are you, sir?
Josh, I'm doing great. We're a few days from Thanksgiving in terms of the real time here. I'm not sure when this will drop, but we're right in front of Thanksgiving. And so we've got visions of turkey in the head right now.
Yes, we do. And Dan, I've seen this view before. This is the famous Dan Pickering CNBC view that most people are used to seeing when you're on there. So this is where you post up most days, correct, in Houston?
Absolutely. It's coming to you from live from 100 WA here in Midtown Houston. So
nice. This is great. It's our
with you.
This is our first virtual podcast we've ever done. So the audience is in for a treat today.
Absolutely, they are. And so let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Joining us today, the CEO and CFO of Sunergy is Mr. Tim Bridgewater. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to the Thanksgiving break as well. And where I'm at, we get snow soon, so snow's coming.
Absolutely. Well, you're physically located in Utah. Your business is in Florida and Texas and Arkansas and Missouri. So we are covering the country with this podcast.
We are
right. 6 states.
Yeah. And this is an interesting podcast for us because for us, this is the first real true solar player that we've had on the podcast, or at least in recent memory. And so we're thrilled to have you here. Before we launch in, we always like to tell the audience if they want to follow along on their computer with a little bit about your company. So I'm going to yell out some stuff and you correct me if I'm wrong, but your website is gosunergy.com.
Correct.
And you're in the process of coming public transaction with the SGen Acquisition Corp, symbol ESAC. And together you guys have posted several things to the investor portion of your website. And I encourage everybody to go to that investor portion. There's an Analyst Day presentation and there's an Analyst Day video. And so after you've listened to Tim here on the podcast, there's another hour of Tim describing the company, which I think could be really helpful for those of you that really want to dig in and get to know the company better. So Tim, thanks for joining us. And maybe where we kick off is where we always kick off with our guests, which is before you talk a lot about your company, we want you to talk about yourself. So tell us who you are, where you grew up, how did you get to where you are today?
Well, my journey actually took me through Houston for a while. We lived in Houston for 1995 to 2000.
Awesome.
So we are familiar, especially we lived out in the Sugar Land, Fort Bend County area, and enjoyed our time in Houston and all the great people. Not so much the scenery. The scenery was a lot of refineries, but the people were incredibly gracious and kind, and we loved our Texas.
I love it. A Texas shout out from the get-go. That's good.
Yeah. So my background has been in commercial banking. I worked for Wells Fargo early in my career, and then went to work for the U.S. government, Export-Import Bank. Graduated in finance from Brigham Young University, and then worked in international markets in Latin America, Southeast Asia for the government, and then in the private sector, I started an investment banking company called Interlink Capital Strategies, and I've been managing director or chairman of that entity for 30 years. And we've done lots of project finance, project development work throughout those years. And I've enjoyed traveling the world and spent a lot of time in Asia, a little bit of time in Africa, and more time in Latin America than probably all of those. So um, the last 10 years of my career, I've been in a combination of fund management work from the investment banking side and also in renewable energy. And so worked on utility scale geothermal projects in the US and in Indonesia, and then gravitated towards utility scale solar projects where we were building 5 to 20 megawatt projects for community solar and small scale projects for co-ops. And during that time, helped my son start a sales company that was based initially in Florida, doing door-to-door sales, knocking doors and selling solar. And that company exploded quite rapidly in 2019, 2020. And in 2021, we decided to become vertically integrated by acquiring an installation company. And we acquired a company called Sunergy Solar.
That's not it.
Our sales company was SunFirst Energy. And then we, from that point, we just grown our business quite rapidly. Solar in general is a rapidly growing industry, and residential solar is the fastest segment of the solar industry. I think in the US there's less penetration than Europe, Australia, and other places, but we're in a really hot market with a company that's growing, 50 to 100% year over year, depending on where you're at in the industry. This year was a little tougher for most players, including the large public companies, because of interest rates. But we've had a good run and making good money, very profitable business, and then decided to take it public through a SPAC when a SPAC approached us about joining with them. So,
believe it or not, you missed a lot of stuff in there. You've done a lot of things. And there's a lot, and we don't have time for it all, but really a cool career.
I did venture into politics and government. I helped on President George W. Bush's campaign, was close to the Bush family while I lived in Houston, and got to know his father well, and also ran my own congressional campaigns. So, but good for the private sector. I lost. And so I'm able to stay out of politics and in the private sector.
Well, that's a great career. It's really a great summary of it as well.
Yeah, it's almost a certainty that your business is making more money than the U.S. government or any political position you would have held. So
yeah, they're going into debt fast and furious, and we're making profits fast and furious. So
absolutely, and interestingly. Most of the time, it's the father who founds the business and the son comes in after. And it sounds like in your case, your son started this business and you came in to help grow it. So kind of an interesting dynamic here.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. It got big really quickly, and we jumped in and I handled all the merger and acquisition business, and then took the helm of the company after the acquisition. So I think part of it is we live in an environment. I'm here in Utah, and one of the engines of growth for companies comes out of this community, where a lot of LDS return missionaries will come home after a 2-year proselyting mission, and they'll be able to face rejection and go out in the summers knocking doors and face rejection 30 times and then get a sale. And there's pest control industries, home alarm industries, security companies, all kinds of businesses that are built on this engine of sales. And my son had done a couple of those different types of sales and decided he wanted to get into solar. And so I helped him and a partner, Kaylin, do that. And as it grew and took off, then we said, we've got to take advantage of this opportunity. So long story short, after 2 years, we're $150 million business this year, with pretty substantial profits. About a 10-11% profit margin.
That's a fabulous success story. And it was going to be, one of my questions to a lot of people who are in a business around energy transition, for lack of a better word, decarbonization, like solar or renewables, is, are you doing it because it was a business opportunity, or are you doing it because you want to save the world? It sounds to me like you saving the world's great, but it's a business opportunity that really drew you to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some social elements. I think most of our customers put solar on their house to save money. They get a feel good from the green energy and decarbonization, but that's not their primary motivation. Likewise, as a company, we're here to make a profit and to grow our business, and that's the primary motivation.
Yeah.
We're not anti-traditional energy by any means. In fact, our investing partner is a traditional gas and oil investor, Energy Spectrum. But there's space for everybody, and I'm a big proponent of nuclear energy as well as a baseload source. So I think the future will have more nuclear and more solar, and there's a lot of growth opportunities in the future. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your business. So, residential solar. Give us the value proposition or the sales pitch. Why does someone want to do this? Because I think if I looked at your numbers right, it's a pretty big ticket for somebody. It's a $30,000-$40,000 thing to put on their roof. And so, how do you find someone who's willing to spend 30 or 40 grand to do this? What's the value prop?
Yeah, the great thing is that it's designed to have long-term financing, so it really drives down the monthly cost of the system, and it makes it competitive with the customer's power bill. So today, utilities are charging, let's call it a typical customer be paying $200 a month in their power bill. For air conditioning, it's higher in the summer and maybe lower in the winter, but they're, on average, they're paying maybe around $200 a month, and we can come in and save them monthly payments by putting solar on their home and driving their cost per kilowatt hour down. And they can also sell their excess power to the grid and get a credit back for it in most states. And I think that it's a nice value proposition. We have high-paid commission sales representatives who make a good profit. Our company makes a profit. The finance partners make a good profit from their finance charges and their interest rates, and we end up still saving the customer money. So I think there's a lot of inefficiency in the utility scale power costs. Power is generally pretty inexpensive to create, but it becomes more expensive when it's deployed through a labyrinth of channels on the grid. So we sit down with the customer across the kitchen table and pitch them on the benefits of solar and how it can save them money monthly. And even if it is just a break-even proposition for whatever reason, they still feel good about it. But the fact that we can save them $10, $20, $50 a month, depending on whether they buy the system on a loan or lease it over a long-term via lease structure, that gives them the ability to do a much better job in financing their decision to go solar.
And there's some pretty substantial tax advantages as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the driving force that makes it competitive with traditional power. There's an investment tax credit that's given to the consumer, the homeowner, of 30% of the value of the system. So in Dan's example of a $40,000 system, the homeowner will get a $12,000 tax credit from that to go against their taxes. So instead of paying taxes, they use the credit to pay their taxes, and they end up saving that much money. So the effective cost of a $40,000 system is $28,000.
And I mean, that number $40,000, is that just pulled from air, or is that a good number? Like, is a $40,000 system enough to run a 3,000 square foot home or 4,000 square?
Yeah, generally it's enough. Most of our average size deal is about 9 kilowatts. It's in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, depending on where it's at, and if they want to add insulation or a new roof, or if they want to do energy efficient appliances. These are all adders, so they can add different things to their system when they buy it, and then include that in the long term financing.
Okay.
And Tim, there's a number of companies that do what you do. Um, your analyst day presentation did a good job of explaining a little bit how you're different, but do that for our audience as well. What's Sunergy's differences versus somebody like a Sonova or someone else that the audience might be aware of that also does residential solar?
Yeah, I think that we are good at sales and installation. I mean, we're a simple company that does simple things well, and we make a profit. And most of the other companies can't claim that. They're very complex. They have financing instruments tied around their balance sheets. So they're either funding or doing, bond issuances and things like that to finance their system. We use third-party lenders for our customers so that they get loans from other parties or other lease companies. And when we do that, it makes our business very simple. So we make a profit consistently, and we expect to continue that trend based on our historical activity. We should be, in the 11 to 12% EBITDA range over time, and continue to grow substantially. We've grown this year, 30 to 35%, which is twice as much as the industry average and much better than a lot of the big public companies have grown. And so I think from the perspective of where we see our niche, if you will, our differentiator, is we're a simple business that investors can invest in and that customers can have us install because we're focused on that. We're good at it. We pride ourselves in going from sale to install as fast as anybody in the business, usually, um, a month to 45 days. And then from installation to PTO, getting the power turned on, in another 45 days. And so that's typically a 90-day window from sale to PTO. And that helps us with the customers. In some cases, it takes longer. Certain municipalities take longer. And so our averages are often longer than that. But in most municipalities, we can move fairly quickly and deliver the install and the turn on to power or turning on the system in a 90-day period. So
Okay, pretty quick. And so you have external financing, not internal financing.
mhm.
You do installing. It sounds like some of the other players may outsource the installation. So you've got your own guys that show up, take panels, put them up on the roof, make sure everything's
Yep.
in working order. Those are Sunergy people, not third-party contractors.
Yeah, and the salesmen are the same, even though they're contractors per se, 1099 salesmen. They're all dedicated to our business, and they're part of our team, and they'll receive stock when we go public. So we have a dedicated workforce to install and a dedicated sales force, and I think that's a differentiator. A lot of the other bigger players just use contractors, sales dealers um, for installs. I mean, they're more at the 30,000 foot perspective instead of down in the weeds running the business day to day, which is what we do at Sunergy.
Okay. And you said at the beginning, and walk us through this. So literally your customer acquisition, it's not billboard advertising or flyers in the mail. It is literally knocking on doors.
Yeah, knocking on doors. It's the lowest customer acquisition cost in the industry. We don't pay anybody anything unless the sale is made.
Okay.
And so if you're doing online marketing or self or calling, you're incurring a lot of costs trying to get those sales. But we eat what we kill in the sales side of our business. And that is very, it's self cleansing in many ways. It's very
Sure.
efficient.
What are the stats? How many doors do you have to knock on to get an appointment? How many appointments do you have to get a sale?
Yeah, typically it's a great question. I'm going to talk in generalities because our SEC attorneys say don't say something that you can't back up meticulously with numbers. So I'll talk in, kind of a scale, but
We
a
live in the
typical.
ballpark. It's good.
Yeah, we have a closer that goes out and knocks the doors, and then the setter gives the 2 hour or 90-minute pitch and closes the transaction. So closers will typically close 1 to 2 deals a day. They have to sit in presentations for every 2 presentations, they close one. The door knockers will tend to knock on, between 30 and 40 doors before they'll get an appointment. And getting an appointment, only 2/3 of the appointments that they set actually show up for a presentation. A third of those will cancel. And so you're talking about,
That doesn't
maybe,
sound terrible. I mean, really,
no,
a third canceling doesn't sound terrible to me, but yeah.
yeah, but you think about the doors knocked. 100 doors knocked in a day is a lot of work.
Yeah, that is. I guess you're
And
right.
sometimes there's no sale, and sometimes there is a sale. Sometimes there are 2 sales. So depending on how that works, but it's mostly summer
That's a good point, too.
sales teams. The guys are going to college, so they're making a lot of money in the summer. That supports their college life or the high living that they want to do in the off months. And so we're really from March to September, and then our sales teams go back to school. So at that point, we get more, um, uh, traditional sources. Other dealers will do some selling for us, but our bulk of time and sales is in those summer months.
Interesting.
What state has the highest hit rate for doors knocked versus appointments made or closed?
I think we're better at our craft in the state that we're, is our core, which is Florida. Texas is a hard door knocking space up in Dallas Fort Worth. Much easier actually in Houston. More people answer their door in Houston than Dallas Fort Worth. I don't know if you can use that in the Dallas versus Houston argument, but so Arkansas has been a good state for us. Missouri we've just gotten into recently, and it's showing pretty well. But we really have the most experience in Florida, where we have a good track record of a lot of interest in solar. Small penetration, less than 5% of the homes have solar on them, so there's a long way to go. California, by contrast, has over 20% of the homes have solar, and Hawaii has over 40% now. So there's a long way to go.
Well, number one, I like to see that Houston is friendly. We open our door. That's still nice. And two, I am starting to see more and more neighbors with solar popping up. So I would think that when you see, and what's interesting is you'll see a neighborhood when you're driving, all of a sudden just one street will just have solar down the entire street. And, and I wonder, is that ever a conscious effort of these companies, your company included, to be like, look, this is a key street that gets a lot of visibility. We need to nail this street to where the neighbors see it when they drive in. Do you guys ever have that type of focus?
I don't think so. The hits are few and far between in terms of neighborhoods for us. So I think over time, a lot of people with south-facing roofs, which is where you maximize your production, it's probably the north side of the street with south-facing roofs, and you see a lot of front solar on it. That's where most people will get the maximum benefit of solar. You can put them on the east and the west, never on the north, but the east, west, and south, and get pretty good production. So over time, one neighbor gets it, and the next neighbor says, "Hey, I'm going to do that. Hey, that looks pretty good." They hear about the savings. People feel good about it, and they just keep adding down the row, probably.
Okay.
Or there could have been a really effective salesman that went and knocked all those doors one time. Who knows? But it's unusual. That's unusual.
Tim, how much does the sales force combined, the door knockers and the closers, how much do they make on a sale? Do they make 10%? Do they make 50%? What's the sales component of the process?
They typically are in the high single digits of commissions, and that's paid out to multiple sales managers, sales closers, and then the setters. So none of them each make that much, but when you combine it, it's about 8% of the total sales uh, amount. But this is, it's hard work, very concentrated work, and they go, 24/7 all summer long, rallying themselves and lifting up their spirits. Sales is a tough job generally, and
Mhm.
knocking on doors is even tougher because you face a lot of rejection before you get one person that'll sit down with you. And when people hear the pitch, I mean, it takes a while to understand how you can save from the utility who's been charging you all this time and feels like your friendly power provider. But if you can save money, most people are open to that, even during the recession. They want to save money even more. So we didn't see a drop off in during the COVID years. We didn't see much of a slowing in our business throughout that time frame until the high interest rates slowed, the entire construction industry down. But even then, we've had 40% growth. So
Yeah, I was
um,
going to ask about that. Interest rates is something that we hear and see a lot in the solar industry on the public companies. Basically saying the cost of doing business has gone, or the cost for the customers gone way up. Um, you're growing through that. Would you have grown faster if it hadn't been for that, or are you just finding the folks that are a little bit less price sensitive, or you're just knocking on more doors to find the ones who are willing to save?
Yeah, I think our average size deal went down this year in part because of interest rates. We had more cancellations in part because of interest rates. The savings were not as high on loan products when you borrow to buy your system as they were prior to the interest rates coming up. So I think there were multiple reasons that there was a slowing across the industry. Some companies actually grew smaller and they had a negative growth rate this year. And we were fortunate to, while we anticipated another near doubling of our size, that didn't happen because of the interest rates. So I'd say overall things slowed, but we're seeing now that interest rates have stabilized and actually may go down, if at least being stable, we feel like we're in a good position to continue our trajectory for growth in the future.
Yeah, and I think I saw in your analyst day presentation you had 2,200 installations in 2022, and or I think you'll be about 3,100 this year. And as you look to next year, what's that? Or do we think about it as installations? Do we think about it as watts installed? What's the metric that you guys track?
Yeah, so we'll do 30 megawatts of installations across our territory this year. Next year, we anticipate doing 45 megawatts or more. That's about a 50% growth rate. And I think we feel we'll do that just baked in with our existing organic growth. Our business has been profitable, and so we've grown organically. We don't have outside debt. We have a pretty smooth process in running our business, very simple, cost-effective business model. And so we anticipate that we'll be able to continue to grow and generate more profits as we grow.
When you move into a new market, are you taking this crew of college kids and sending them to Arkansas for the summer, or are you recruiting Arkansas kids? Or I'm saying kids, individuals.
Yeah,
Is it a local sales force? Is it a drop-in sales force? How, as you expand, where do you find the extra people?
yeah, great question. So we are at the heart of BYU, UVU, University of Utah, and other schools where a lot of the LDS missionaries, when they come back, will go to college here. And so it's a common theme to recruit for this direct sales businesses. Vivint Home, Smart Home, and lots of other companies recruit heavily in this arena and build their growth on that. The competitors in our industry, Sunrun, Solar companies, SunPower, Sunergy, being one of those companies, we all recruit in a competitive force. One of the advantages to our recruiting success has been that our salesmen make a lower per watt commission, but they make more money because we're more efficient at getting the installs in the year. So we have better training, better system efficiency, and so they make more money. And the industry recognizes that and has awarded us disproportionate gold, what they call Golden Door Award, because our managers and our salesmen have made more money on average than other companies. So we tend to be, I think, slightly more efficient than some of our competitors in that area.
That's a great place to recruit. To be honest
Yeah,
with you, those young kids, they go on their 2-year mission trips, and there's rejection, there's acceptance, they're learning languages, learning how to kind of survive and work in the heat, and they're good kids, and they come back to go to school, and yeah, they want to make some money, and
yeah. It's a unique
that's an
talent.
awesome
It's a
idea.
unique
Yeah, it
skill
is.
set. Because if you go to, we're out in Florida and we've tried to recruit from some of the Florida colleges there, and it's just not the same mentality to come in and grind. I mean, you have to have the
Mm-hmm.
grit and the grind
Mm-hmm.
to just face that constant rejection
Mm-hmm.
and pull your way through it and not have it overwhelm you. And most people aren't, their DNA just isn't lined up for that. If you've probably
That's
played
unique.
in football, or if you've served in the military, or faced tough things, you're probably more prone to be able to be successful at it. And one of those experiences has been these return missionaries. So
You mentioned,
Very unique.
yeah, you mentioned earlier, Tim, that um, in some instances, your clients, or in many instances, your clients can sell power back to the grid, and so that takes us to this concept of net metering, which hopefully you can demystify it for us. So, explain to us what the regulations are around selling power back to the grid versus not being able to.
yeah, so
Net
many
metering.
states will get and utilities, I should say, because of their regulated utilities, they're forced to kind of comply with what the commissions will impose upon them. But they all try to give you something back. If you produce power onto the grid, they'll give you some credit. But the states where we're successful in are 1-to-1. So you buy power from the utility for 12 cents, and if you produce power and give it to them, they'll give you a credit for 12 cents per kilowatt hour. And if it's 50% of that, so let's say they give you back 6 cents for every uh, kilowatt you produce and put on the grid, then you're losing efficiency. You're better off buying a battery, storing your power in at the 12-cent equivalent, and then taking it out of the battery. So in Texas and a lot of states, you see more use of batteries, and especially if people don't have confidence in the grid anymore. And there's been some outages in Texas that have really threatened the folks there and made them feel uncomfortable about the grid and delivery of power. So, but by and large, if you can get the 1-to-1 net metering in states like Florida and Arkansas and others, you tend to be more efficient. You can store credits and then utilize them. So you install a system that will produce more than you need during the day and help serve you at night by pulling you back. So the grid becomes your battery in that sense. You don't need to pay
Yeah.
the unnecessary cost of the battery. And if you have a battery, you want it to make economic sense. And most of the time, it's not saving the customer money in our case. It's just giving them comfort to have a battery. But now
Mm-hmm.
the battery costs are coming down. At some point, I think battery costs will be low enough that they'll engender savings. If they get to $3,000 to $5,000 for a 10 kW battery, for example, you'll be able to see and demonstrate savings right away. But they've typically been $10,000 to $20,000 for that kind of a battery, and it's hard to show a customer savings with that expensive battery system.
So the 1-to-1 is much more advantageous for the individual consumer, your
Yeah,
customer. And in states that don't give you full credit, and like California is one of those now, it sounds like,
now, yeah.
then it's less advantageous for the customer, more advantageous for the installed utility. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yeah, they don't want to give you that kind of credit. They want to get cheap power from you and charge you expensive power. And that's what's happened in California from NEM 2.0 to NEM 3.0.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing now in California is that it almost makes no sense to not include a battery in the purchase. And almost, I'd say, well over 90% of the solar installs now have a battery included, because you can make the economic case now, because the utility won't give you uh, value for overproducing. You can make the economic case to do it yourself.
Is it a little bit, and I'm straying into dangerous territory here, but um, it feels like almost California's done a bit of a bait and switch. They encourage everybody to get solar, spend the money, get get solar on your rooftop, and then come back and say, oh well, we're not going to buy your power at 1 to 1. It's 50 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar, something like that. Do you worry about that in your Florida markets or Texas, Arkansas?
I think most states, and I think this is true to NEM 3.0, is they grandfather the existing system. So there was a rush to install solar systems in California before NEM 3.0 took place. They wanted to get them in to get those benefits. So they tend not to cut people off if the previous regime or the previous policy was beneficial. They grandfather you in, so you still have maintain those benefits when you purchase the system. Florida saw a similar bill, and it was planned to grandfather. I think it was going to go into effect over a 5-year period, and would grandfather everybody that got solar installed in the next 2 years, and would then ratchet up the net metering benefits to the utility, and take them away from the consumer. And so, but it was vetoed by Governor DeSantis, and we're fans of his because he was helpful to the industry. So.
Okay, and you're only focused on residential customers. If you have an installation business, um, commercial and industrial customers, I guess the sales model is different, right? It's not door knocking, and so your view is that residential customer is just a more profitable one than commercial industrial.
Yeah, it's certainly more predictable. So if you think about the investment tax credits, which drives a lot of investors to do third-party lending and leasing into the system, you can predict with relative ease how many installations we're going to have in systems because they come in small bites and you do a lot of them. A big utility scale project may be delayed a year or 2 years, so it's harder to predict how you get the tax benefits and the economic benefits of bringing that power onto the grid. I've had experience in all ends of the spectrum, and it's a much more complicated sale, even to do C&I business, commercial and industrial uh, business, because it takes long to plan. People change their minds, whereas we're just out going plunkety plunk, selling every day, adding projects every day, and so it's a little different model. We're not as we don't use as much of the solar equipment, inverters, and panels as the big utility scale projects do. We don't get as good a pricing as they do either, but on the equipment. But we have a better economic model because it's more profitable. It delivers the benefits right to the consumer instead of to a municipal power provider who then ups the cost to the consumer to get their piece of the puzzle and then delivers the cost at roughly the same price that they would traditional power. So.
Look, I just want to jump right back to one point. We were talking about those batteries. This is a silly question. Maybe it's not. I don't know. The batteries you're talking about does that completely displace one of these Generac generators? I mean, can you have both, or would you just get rid of it completely for the storage on the house?
Yeah, we don't sell many Generac generators, so I know there's an interest, but it's a comfort mechanism, right? If you feel like your power is going to go out and you want to generate power, that Generac generator will be there all the time, running on gasoline
Nat gas,
or diesel, and any power Honda electric generator that you can buy at Home Depot. All of those kind of serve a similar backup function if you want that additional comfort. But you don't get any value day to day out of that system. It's just sitting there and may go unused for years, and you pay upwards of $20,000 for the install and for the setup and and for the equipment, and then it's just a comfort, just like the batteries are in many cases. They're just providing you a feeling like you're going to be safe in an emergency. And while solar is designed and can be designed to give you the backup power you need during the day, even without a battery. And if you have a battery, it can give you 3 to 4 hours of power in the evening if you're judicious. and all the power you need in the daytime. So, it's just a preference. And like I say, we don't sell a lot of generators because we don't feel like they're as beneficial to the customer more than, from an economic perspective of saving them money.
Well, no, what I'm saying, and I appreciate that. What I mean too is, is there the battery option to be used as an emergency situation backup,
Yes.
where that you guys do store or sell? I mean,
Yeah, we sell Enphase batteries and Franklin batteries, and I think we're not Tesla's been a hard battery to get, even though it's an attractive brand and has its own benefits, but they're hard to get. It's a 12-month order time from time to time. But Enphase and in our experience has been really able to deliver volume consistently, relatively quickly. We have a scalable business that requires us to move lots of pieces every day, and they've been able to keep up with us. So.
One of the things that struck me about how you run your business, um, you don't stack up a bunch of solar panels in a warehouse somewhere and have a bunch of inverters in another warehouse. Um, so you have suppliers deliver all of the equipment to the household, correct?
Yeah, we're capital light in that we don't take control of the inventory. The distributor has it, and they ship a package palleted for that customer's installation with everything that's needed right to the home. And our guys show up that morning or the next day and install it. And
Well, talk to us about the supply chain, because I assume that was a little tricky, 3 years ago during COVID when supply chains were
you guys
messed
have
up.
read the Gold Rat books.
it was a difficult time for sure. we had we could get stuff because of our size, but it was more expensive
Hmm.
because of the supply chain problems. So you had fewer panels out there, so they were able to raise the price and get more, but we were able to stay in panels because of our scale and our relationship with the distributor. In our case, CED Green Tech, and they tried to make sure we had everything we needed, but the price uh, skyrocketed. Panels went from 30 cents a watt to 65 cents a watt, for example.
Wow.
And inverters went up as well. So
Where are they today, Tim? Any challenge?
they're back down to the low 30s, high 20s.
So the cost side of the equation is
Yeah,
getting
it's gotten
more
better.
attractive on the margin.
Yeah, and that's helped to mitigate the interest rate
Yeah.
increase as well. So
And last question around the kind of function, or at least last question for me on how your business works. You talked a lot about external financing providers, but then I hear you talking more about leasing now. So a financing provider is simply loaning the customer some money. So the customer, the homeowner, owns the system. And
mhm.
now there are the business models emerging where someone else owns the system and it leases
Yeah,
it
I
to
think
that
that
home.
traditionally I was listening to the CEO of SunPower. I think Sonova and SunPower and Sunrun all have predicted that this coming year, more customers will utilize third-party ownership, TPO financing versus traditional lenders, long-term loans. If the customer borrows, they can own the system and receive the tax credit themselves against their taxes. But if a third party group owns it and leases it to them, then what they end up getting is a lower monthly cost because the ITC goes to the investor and depreciation goes to the investor. So they're left with a lower cost on a monthly basis. So their savings is really in the monthly, not the tax credit and other things as well. So
So what happens on a lease is maybe the inherent borrowing cost has gone up, but because the benefits are going to that lease provider, they wind up seeing the same dynamic, which is a lower monthly cost relative to the utility bill.
yeah,
And
and I
who
think
are the people providing leases to this industry? Is it big infrastructure funds, or is it who loans money via leases to
yeah,
this?
there are a few banks that do it. There's a couple of private companies that are involved in solar loans. There are The SunPower and Sonova themselves offer leases that third-party groups, inclusive companies like ours, could access. We use a private, kind of an affiliated group for some of our leases. We did a pilot this year and it went pretty well. So we've been pleased with that. Just in the fourth quarter, we've seen an uptick in our sales deals through leases.
Interesting. Okay. At the end of the day, though, you are what about, you're not taking any customer risk once they sign up, they're financing through someone else. So you come in, provide your install services. Are you doing warranty work? Are you servicing on the back end?
Yeah, we do. We actually, so there's a 25-year warranty on the equipment, which is really great for the customer. And if there's a failure of an inverter or a panel, then those manufacturers will pay us to go and replace it for the customer. We don't make a lot of money on it, but we gives the customer, uh, you know, feeling that the equipment is taken care of. In addition to that, we do a workmanship warranty, a full, complete bumper to bumper warranty for the first 2 years. So if there's any problem that we created, electrical shorts or roof penetration, that there was a leak because it didn't get sealed up properly, things like that, we'll go back and we warranty that ourselves. And then after that time, we have another 8 years of limited warranty that will go and do anything that a customer needs, but they have to pay for the truck roll. It's like a $250 or a $300.
It's like a service call type fee. Yeah.
Service call fee, and then we'll fix whatever's the problem with the system. So we have it's a pretty good warranty for the customer.
I mean, I would think that everything that we read is that quality, the workmanship, the product has gotten better, better, faster, stronger in the last couple of years. So, when you mentioned a 25-year warranty, how often are you even seeing issues where you have to go out and fix something? Is this put it in, it's broken in 6 months, or no, these are genuinely, for the most part, they're in for a while and it's really the one-offs that are having issues?
Yeah. So a roof will have lots of panels. You may have 20 or 30 or 40 panels. And usually what happens is one will go out. And so when you see that on the inverter production system, you can see that there's a panel that's not functioning. It's low production, or it may be completely off. And, they'll try to fix it, but typically we'll just go back and replace the panel. And inverters, likewise, we don't use a big inverter. Some companies do, but we use micro inverters from Enphase mostly. And those inverters are small and they're at the scale that, one goes out, it takes out 4 panels, but it's the inverter that's the problem. And so we go in and replace the inverter. Likewise, everything pops back up generally. Hopefully that a panel doesn't also go out, because that would make it a little challenging for us. But we roll our trucks out, and the manufacturers pay us for that because they warranty that equipment.
So if a panel goes out of 25, the customers, they're noticing just a slight issue. They're not noticing catastrophic failure of power, right? I mean, they're okay.
Yeah, that's generally what will happen. I mean, if a whole system goes out, it's probably a problem of how the installation was done by the crew, and it needs to be fixed or reconnected or something like that. There's a breaker that's, they didn't get a main panel upgrade, for example. If their system was too big, they have to upgrade their main panel. And if they didn't do that, it may tax their system. And so that's one of the issues that will come up from time to time. And you have to go back and retrofit the electrical system with the main panel upgrade.
Okay.
Tim, you're going public. You're doing it via this the SPAC backed by Energy Spectrum, and why go public? And tell us a little bit about timing and capital proceeds, and what are you going to do with the money?
Yeah, great question. We were approached by several SPACs. We were looking for additional capital, just to raise some capital, and we were approached by a couple of SPACs, and Energy Spectrum was the group that was the most compelling. They weren't necessarily the highest valuation, but they were the most compelling group because of their background. It's a big $4.5 billion private equity group that's done a lot of traditional power, gas, pipelines, infrastructure investments, and they know how to drive costs down. And that's what we're looking for is, making ourselves more and more efficient. The residential business is inherently sloppy right now. It's kind of like wildcatting out in the west side of Texas in the old days. A lot of successes, a lot of failures. There's a lot going on. It's a lot of fragmented. And so going public allows us to possibly consolidate some of those fragmented pieces, gives us some capital to look at acquisitions, to go into additional states more quickly and bolster our installation operations there. And, it's allowing us to move more quickly. Plus the sort of the quality of being a public company sets you apart in the industry. There's lots of small players out there selling to consumers with crazy names and lots of different 1 and 2 man shows and 10-man shows, and this allows us to have I think a stronger brand that consumers can trust, and they know that this is a company that's going to stay around. They're going to be in business. Those warranties matter, and that's our overall objective as we go public.
Okay. And in SPACs these days, you never know quite what you're going to get in terms of when the deal's approved. There's a redemption period that shareholders can redeem, and so a lot of times there's a PIPE or a public sidecar investment where you're going to get the capital. How much money do you know you're going to get, and is it enough, or do you have to have some proceeds from the SPAC?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're expected to have, after the dust all settles, 20 million plus on the balance sheet after we go public through the raise that's going on. We'll raise 30 to 40 million dollars via the PIPE. Our Energy Spectrum has already committed an additional 10 million to come in with us in the transaction. So we don't need a lot of cash. We're a positive cash flowing business, and so it's mostly for expansion and strengthening our overall operations, having a strong balance sheet. We don't have debt today, other than like $1 million in vehicle debt for our service vehicles. So we are a pretty lean and profitable company from that perspective. So I think we anticipate success in the pipe market because of those issues, but there's no guarantee. We're just getting started on that with a number of investors who've indicated some interest, but we hope to raise 30 to 40 million dollars relatively soon.
Okay, that's helpful. And acquisitions is one of the things you talked about. For these smaller shops, is it just a standard kind of multiple of EBITDA that you buy on? Is it a multiple of revenue? Is it how do you buy these smaller shops, that are mostly people driven, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't afford as a public company to pay a little bit more than a private equity firm might value a company at, because typically you're in a 5 to 7 that's profitable.
Yep.
And from a public company standpoint, we should be both trading at a much higher multiple than that, and be able to bring on customers using capital, public stock as opposed to cash for part of the acquisition cost, if not the full acquisition. So that's our sense of where the real opportunities lie is using our public stature and consolidating some fragmented pieces of the industry that we like.
Or go find the location that has the salesman that has the entire street locked up. That
guy.
Let's go find that guy.
Absolutely.
That's one of the questions. You've seen how organized Dan is. I love how organized Dan is, because one of the questions, with regard with what are you guys going to do with the new money is what geographic markets look interesting, right? With your new ideas. And we had a guy on one of the early podcasts that we did, and Jim Hughes, and he said, I was really surprised to figure out what states were harder to do business in than I would have thought, right? Some are that I would have thought would have been easy. He said, aren't as easy as you think. So are there different areas that you guys have looked into going into that you think are going to be, I don't want to say easy, but are you excited about some new areas to go into, or that you guys have studied?
Net metering, we love net metering, that's one-to-one, because that's where the customers get the most economic
Right.
benefit. So that's our sweet spot from our sales team. But we're going into Ohio and Illinois this coming year. Our teams have gone out and researched the you know the competition. Whether the big players like Sunrun and SunPower and Sonova are out in those markets, or whether they're relatively open. And feels like those markets will give our guys a good chance at success. From the sales team, we'll go in typically and drop a sales team in the beginning of the summer, and then hire contractors to install for us for the first couple of weeks until we get enough sales volume to then bring on our own in-house guys there. That's what we did in Arkansas. It's what we did when we first moved into Texas. And, we expect to continue to do that in those two new states. So
Good areas, growing areas. So I can imagine those are going to do well for you up there.
yeah, we hope so. And they're not necessarily on the radar screen of the big 800-pound gorillas. So,
we're one of our businesses is the steel business. And I will tell you, I've actually had some LDS employees that worked for me, believe it or not, and they were great. I'd never put two and two together that they were some of my high frequency sales guys until this conversation, actually. But the other similarity that we're talking about is the Midwest groups are very effective. That old Chevy commercial, the heartbeat of America. I think you're going to find some of the people that you find in Ohio State and the college kids throughout that whole region are going to be great workers. The farm kids that come off the farms there, those are probably going to be just a different type of worker up in the Midwest there. I think you're going to find a lot of good sales guys in that area.
Yeah, no, we are always keeping open and trying to recruit during the summertime that our teams are out there. All of our installation people and all of our back office operations people doing permitting and working with the building departments in each of these states, they're all local people. So, it creates jobs, local jobs, and builds, a good base. So we have over 200 employees on our payroll, and then another 300 sales and setter staff that are 1099 that are dedicated just to our company. So
that's a good sized company. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Tim, any other questions we ought to ask you about your business before we go to our lightning round?
I think that I would view us as the little engine that could. Right, we're going into a space to be public. We should generally be much bigger than we are today, because it's the cost of being public and the compliance issues and all that you have to deal with. It's an onerous process, especially after Sarbanes-Oxley. And I think that our belief is, and one of the reasons we're going public is because we're growing so fast that growth should generate benefits for all of our owners and our staff and everybody that's going to be bought into the stock. So we feel like that even though we'll be small in the beginning, that we'll grow faster than our competitors and be able to catch up to them and be one of the four And it's not a 9/11. Don't get me wrong, but it's nice
where
still.
where people work hard and win is, I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work, right? That's what our country is all about. That's really cool.
That's right.
Okay, let's do the lightning round. Tim, and by the way, thank you. This was very informative,
Yeah.
a lot, and I know our listeners will really enjoy it. So lightning round rules are: you don't get to explain your answer. We just learn a little bit more about you by these short single word answers. So
I can't qualify.
you cannot qualify, exactly. So, having said that, Josh, you want to kick us off?
I do. Tim, thank you again, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Florida State Seminoles or the Miami Dolphins?
Oh, Miami, the quarterback's out for Florida State.
Five Guys or In-N-Out Burger?
Oh, I love them both, but the Five Guys burger experience is really unique.
Hydrogen or carbon capture?
Hydrogen.
Eagles or AC/DC?
The Eagles.
Will the world hit net zero by 2050?
I doubt it.
Cash or crypto?
Cash.
Lacrosse or soccer?
Soccer.
For 2024, next year, are you bullish or bearish on the S&P 500?
Bullish.
F-150 or Ford Lightning?
Oh, that's tricky. I have a Ford Raptor, so and I think the Ford Raptor is superior to the Lightning, but the typical F-150, the Lightning's way ahead of that. So it depends on if you're comparing the Ford Raptor and the Lightning or just the F-150.
Unfortunately, you screwed that answer up with such a long answer, so that one is just out, even though it's a great answer.
He's breaking the rules. He's breaking the rules. Does the Ukraine conflict continue beyond June of 2024?
Yes.
Yeah, and we've just recently added the second part, which is unfortunate. But does the Israeli-Hamas conflict extend into next year as well, or to June of 24 as well?
No, I don't think
Okay.
so.
Work from office or work from home?
Office.
Another IRA type of bill in the next 3 years?
I don't think so.
And the only question that we ask every guest, and the one that sort of makes or breaks whether you become a personal friend or not, Tim, will the Houston Texans make the Super Bowl in the next decade?
Wow. I think C.J. Stroud is good enough to take them to a Super Bowl. I think he's good enough.
I think
that
yes.
Deshaun Watson did you guys a dirty down there. I mean,
He really did.
The good news with Deshaun Watson is that he's done more damage to the Cleveland Browns than he did to the Texans. So
you played football as well at BYU, or where did you play?
I played at a junior college.
Okay, and then you were injured. That's right. You went to business school at BYU afterwards.
Yeah, I went to finance business school at BYU after. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
you know your stuff for sure.
How did I score on the lightning round? What was that?
You did great.
I had one get
there is
thrown
no
out.
correct answers, but you did great. Tim Bridgewater, you're the CEO and CFO of Sunergy. We can find you on your website, www.gosunergy.com. We're really excited to see what's next as a public company, and we thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it, Tim.
Great. Look for us to go public in January, and thanks, Josh and Dan, for your time today.
Thank you, Tim.